Hello, hello. It is another episode of Experience Action Podcast. And this is my favorite time of the month, the CX Pulse Check, when we check in with customer experience stories that are happening in real time. And we bring in special co hosts to discuss these topics with us. Today, I'm so thrilled to have with us Maria Villablanca, CEO of the Future Insights Network. Maria, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I know we're going to have fun, but before we get started and dive into the topics that we selected today, I would love for you to share a little bit about what you do in the world and your background.
Thanks so much. So the thing I love talking about is supply chain transformation. The Future Insights Network is a network of over 130,000 senior supply chain leaders worldwide that get together to try to find ways to transform themselves to deal with the world today. And so I have a podcast, I travel the world, I speak to a lot of people, and effectively talking about supply chain transformation is what makes me happy.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think today I would love your perspective on that because one of the things that I think, I don't know if it was the pandemic or just that time, I believe that the connection between supply chain management and customer experience, like all the barriers had to come down during that time. And now we realize the influence that everything has. And I know that the customer experience leaders that I talk to really have worked at creating relationships with their supply chain leaders, understanding the whole supply chain life cycle and the expectations and everything else. So I think we're going to have fun today. So the first topic that we're going to talk about, the headline, and this is from CNBC, is machine customers are already among us and they number in the billions. And this really caught my eye because when we talk about AI and customer experience, so much of that we're talking about on the organizational side. We're talking about AI bots and, all the different ways that AI can help with customer analytics and things like that. But this is really about, what? We're going to start having customers, quote unquote, that are driven by AI. And in some ways, this is already happening. And the more that I read into this, I thought, this might be really nice for customers, right? Like, I don't want to sit on the phone and wait. I don't want to have to call back a zillion times. What are some of the ways that you think this could impact customer experience moving forward?
I think this is a really interesting topic because of the fact that AI, we talk about it from an enterprise level. That's what you've been saying. We're talking about Gen AI and how that's going to impact businesses. But as individuals, as humans, we are also utilizing this to make our lives easier. And if AI can enable us to not sit on the phone or not waste time, then of course we're going to take advantage of it. I use ChatGPT, and by the way, I want to say something else. It isn't just something for Gen Z or for Gen Alpha or for millennials. I'm a Gen Xer and I use ChatGPT. I chat with chatbots. I find the quickest way to try to resolve my problems. So, I think that this is going to be something that is going to fundamentally change the customer experience,
Mhm.
how we see things. And I think that companies need to be really in tune with what's out there and the expectations that customers have to fast tracking the things that they want to get done.
Yep. And I think you hit on a really important point there because one of the things that we see with customer expectations over and over again is that they keep getting more demanding when it
Yes.
comes to time and convenience. We want things on our terms as customers. And I think that over the last several years, what we've been seeing is that a lot of our clients now are from the business to business space. They're from manufacturing. They're from less traditional kind of customer focused organizations because they're catching up. They're starting to realize, you know what, people have choice. There is so much less of the pain of switching. It used to be, remember switching a bank and how painful that
Oh,
used to be, right?
yeah.
Like, well, I already have my box of checks, so I have to get through
Yeah.
my box of checks before I can
Yeah.
leave this situation that I don't like as a customer. That all has just gotten more and more minimal to customers. I think one of the things that really struck me about this was if we had think about just, the little touch points in our daily life. I'm always talking to my smart speakers, right? I'm talking
Mhm.
into my watch to
Yeah,
set timers and whatever. And think about that in like 5 years and how we will just have things that kind of know our patterns. And
yeah,
so our machines will be able to do things for us in ways that we can't even see right now. And what struck me about this as a customer experience person is we have to start thinking about customer journeys differently. Because even
completely.
though these machines are there, they're still serving somebody, some individual person. So, like, how do we weave all of this together? I think it's a big opportunity, but right now it can feel like a challenge.
Jeannie, I think it's important to realize that this isn't just 5 years from now. I
Right.
mean, there's a term I use quite a lot. We've been Amazoned. That's the
Mhm.
reality. We've been Amazoned, and that has led us to a position where we expect things even before we know we want things. And that's what, say, wearable devices do, and assistants like Amazon Alexa or Google Dot, or all of these things, Google Echo. I mean, all of these things, what they do is that they will order things for you before you even know you need it, because they know
Mhm.
you need it, because it's
Right.
speaking to your fridge and your fridge tells them that there's no milk. And so that means that these customers are not you per se, they're people
Right.
serving you. And
Right.
so I think that this is stuff that's happening. It's not stuff of science fiction, it's stuff of
Mhm.
science fact today.
Yeah.
And that's just going to continue to get bigger and better as we have more wearable technology, as we have more interaction points with electronic and AI devices.
Mhm. I think you're totally right, and way back when, we used to talk about and we still do, like, humans are not always logical, right? Like, we rely on emotions to make decisions more than logic, and our friends can predict our behavior better than we can. And when I was reading into this, one of the things that struck me was exactly what you're talking about. These machines are going to be able to predict kind of our needs, our behaviors before we
Our
even
irrationalities,
or
our
yeah,
irrationalities.
exactly, exactly, and it's like, what will that mean, and what are the control factors that we need to also allow for people to feel empowered by this and not kind of overrun by this. And that whole data privacy part is really important and all of that. And I think that when we're talking about these things, it's very easy to stay in that level of like, this is so cool. And we're gonna have things delivered before we even know. That data privacy thing, I think, customers are becoming more and more savvy about that. They want more
Yeah.
control. And I think we're going to have to develop ways to really be transparent about that and help people feel empowered so that they know that they're still the one in charge, even if the machines are filling their fridge.
But you said so yourself, it's about mapping the customer journey in a different way, maybe having even psychological inputs into how customers and machines are interacting with each other to
Yeah.
determine these irrationalities. I mean, the toilet paper fiasco was a very important one, that it had an impact on supply chains. Who would have predicted that during COVID, toilet paper was going to be the one thing that people were going to be hoarding? And yet,
Very
here
interesting.
we are.
I know. It's really funny to think back on some of those moments now that we're, somewhat on the other side and think about all the things we used to kind of I think, what that reminded me of was there are moments in your life where you don't have control over certain things, so you try to have control over other things, and that's what that
Yeah.
felt like to me. Like,
Yeah.
so many people felt like we were out of control, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had never been through something like this, most of us, and to really have control over, "Well, I know I'm going to have toilet paper. You can take away a
Right.
lot, but I will have that."
100%.
Uh, well, and the flip side of this, right? When the other thing that we wanna talk about today is an article out of The Economist. I'll pull it over here. And this is, it's called "The Last Stand of the Call Center Worker." And, in the industry right now, in customer experience, there's a lot of hand-wringing over this. There's a lot of anxiety over the idea that and the subtitle here is "AI is poised to eliminate customer service agents. We'll miss them when they're gone." And I really feel like part of this article was not just making the case about there are certain things humans can do that we will miss when we don't have that, but the flip side of that is customer service agents, call center agents, those are jobs that are available to people who might not have other options in certain parts of the world, in certain parts of the country. And so, this is kind of like, what do we do with all those workers? What can we do to help people figure out what their next step is if AI is going to take on so much of this work? And I think it's a really important question that maybe we're not asking enough. So I'm curious about your perspective here because you're coming from that supply chain and that a little more back end. So what are you seeing here?
Look, I've got mixed feelings about this one because from a process perspective or efficiency perspective, anything that improves customer service is a good thing, right? Irrespective of
Mhm.
who does it. If we find that the machines are more able to or quickly able to discern facts or crunch through information, connect the dots, as it were, mimic to some degree some of the better behaviors that we have, if that all leads to better customer service, then it's a win. That's a
Right.
win for the company, it's a win for the customer, it's a win for efficiency, it's a win for connectedness as well, right? So where you can have, again, looking at it from a back end perspective, if AI is dealing with this, and that's data that's being pulled back into the business, pulled into better decision making. So from that perspective, I think it could be a big win, right? But then there's the big moral dilemma, like you say. A lot of customer service roles are taken by a lot of people that maybe don't have other options, people that need to work from home, people that are perhaps from diverse backgrounds, from different types of scenarios that they have that lead them to these positions. What are we going to do with them? And here's why: because unlike other revolutions, whether they are industrial revolutions that take a period of decades to really take change into effect, this is going to happen over a very short period of time. So reskilling is difficult to do in a year,
Mhm.
for such a huge number of people in the workforce. So I think that there's a lot of questions that aren't being asked about, okay, AI, and I'm a big proponent of AI
Mhm.
because it enhances people's work. It means that it frees me up and frees my team up to do things that really they love and adds value, right? But what about the people that are replaced?
Mhm.
We keep hearing about, well, AI is not going to come to take your jobs. Don't be a fear monger. But the reality is, it is
Yeah.
taking some jobs. That is a reality. We're seeing that across tech at the moment, right? With a lot
Mhm.
of jobs being made redundant because uh, board level, C level decision making people have a responsibility to create profitable businesses. And if
Mhm.
AI creates that efficiency that allows for us to have fewer people, then of course they're going to take advantage of it. So what do we do? What
Right.
do we do with that? What do we do with reskilling people? Fortunately, I know that there's a lot of endeavors to reskill and retrain people,
Mhm.
but equally, I also remain hopeful. I remain hopeful that humanity always finds a way to innovate, to evolve, to reinvent itself.
Yep.
So if you look back to the last industrial revolution, or look back to our own ancestors, your great grandparents, my great grandparents, their parents, they probably mostly had jobs in manufacturing or in
Mhm.
farming, right? But yet, think of the jobs that exist today that didn't exist 100 years ago: manicurist,
Yeah.
social media expert, influencer, podcaster.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there were a lot of jobs that didn't exist in any way, shape, or form. A lot
Mhm.
of jobs that existed then that don't exist today. And I think humanity has found a way to fill those gaps and create
Mhm.
jobs, create demand in things. So who knows what these people will have an opportunity to do? Maybe they will create a new fantastic job in something completely different.
Yeah. I love this optimism, and what you're making me think of is kind of the sometimes the thing that happens with cities, right? When they're kind of reborn, when the main industry goes away or they run into trouble and it just doesn't work the way it always had. And there's usually a dip and then they come back, and they come back as something else. They come back, I mean, we didn't have Silicon Valley, right? We didn't know what that was. That wasn't a place for a really long time. It earned that name because that's what became of that location. I look at what's happening in Detroit, Michigan right now. They're having, kind of a rebirth, an evolution because they had to figure it out. And
Yeah.
there are so many examples like that where, it might have been textiles at one point or steel mills or all these things that maybe we don't have as many of. And so we kind of adapt, and I always say, like, humans are amazing. They really are. They figure things out. They solve problems, before they even happen sometimes. So, I agree with you on this. I also think that one of the things that we're just starting to see a little bit is that AI can go wrong, right? Like, AI doesn't have all the answers, and so
Did you sorry to interrupt you. Did you see recently ChatGPT started speaking in Spanglish?
Yes.
Uh, just out of the blue.
Yes, exactly. It started going, and it was quoting Shakespeare incorrectly. It was doing all
Mm,
sorts of things. And that's because, the machines are only as good as the input that they learn from.
yes.
And so we need people who understand these very human situations and understand how to actually prompt the right things and train the machines. So I think there's opportunity there as well. There aren't as many opportunities granted, so some jobs will simply be replaced. But I agree with you that there's something here that we're at the cusp of, and I think we're going to see that. As we move into this now, I think there's so much enthusiasm and excitement
Mm,
about AI, and when I talk to different customer experience leaders, one of the things I ask them is like, have you organized and kind of taken inventory over all those mundane, repeatable questions that you get? Because AI is perfect for that. But, when it comes to nuance, we still need humans. And if somebody's calling in crisis because they can't, they're locked out of their bank account or something like that, we might just need to have dedicated people just to have empathy with them, just to really be there. There's data coming out now saying that sometimes AI actually shows more empathy in certain circumstances because empathy is a finite resource. So if you are being, tackled with customer complaints all day, you might not have as much empathy at the end of the day as you did in the beginning. But I think that there are certain circumstances that we still need to reserve for highly trained, empathetic people who can be there and show compassion and understanding for the
A
customer.
hu 100%. I mean, when things are tough, we want to know that people get us, that
Yes,
people understand that I'm upset about something, and as a customer, I'm calling you because I've got this issue, and it's bothering me, and it's upsetting me. And as a human, you know that, well, maybe you're talking to a young mom who's got three yelling kids in the background, and you can empathize with that because we've all been there. And you can say, look, okay, let me solve this for you, and a machine might not be able to do that, right?
that's
um,
right.
but but at the same time, you've got to also think about the fact that humanity is resourceful, right? And so AI is based on data, data that has existed, right? That so it had to exist to create the output, right? So what I mean by that is AI only knows what exists. And what humans are really good at is knowing things, creating things out of nothing, out of scenarios that have never occurred. Data, AI works on scenarios that have occurred or maybe could occur based on data that it's familiar with. Whereas, you could see all of a sudden, again, I'm going to use an example. You could see your kid climbing up on top of the fridge to go get that cookie because you know that somehow that's something that was never expected. An AI program could never have written the fact that a 2-year-old or 3-year-old is climbing on top of the fridge, but you know what to do in those situations. AI wouldn't
Mhm,
know what to do because it doesn't have the data in the back to tell you what to do. So that's an example I always use of
mhm.
the limitations for the moment of AI, that it
That's a
only
good
knows
one.
how to work with data from existing scenarios, right?
Mhm. It's a
Humans,
really good
though,
point.
Humans, though, we could see, I don't know, some sort of hugely weird thing happen, and you know how to deal with it, or at least you improvise and you're resourceful enough. So I
Mhm.
think humans will always need to be able to be there for those moments that AI can't predict, that AI
Yep.
can't fathom, probably is the better word. So it's a question of empathy, resourcefulness, and a question of being able to use that wonderful brain power that still exists in most of us, right? To be able to deliver better value for everyone
Mhm.
around us. But
Mhm.
again, going back to your point of the general worker in customer service that may be out of a job today or tomorrow, or in
Mhm.
a couple of years time, I think it's going to be about reskilling. It's going to be about thinking about what is possible.
Mhm.
We saw that during the pandemic as well. There's been a lot of migration from jobs, from some jobs to other jobs, and again, going back to jobs that didn't exist, the job prompt engineer didn't exist a year ago.
That's right,
You,
that's
you
right.
know, but yet today they're highly paid people. People
Yep,
are prompt engineers. And
yep.
so I remain again hopeful that humanity
Mhm.
will always be resourceful enough to find a way to do well, to
Yep,
thrive.
yep. I'm with you on that one. All right, this last topic, this is a little bit of a doozy, a little bit of a left turn.
Uh-oh.
Um, because, I struggled with even putting a spotlight on this because the person involved has said some absolutely atrocious things. We're not a fan. Um, but what is interesting is what has happened uh with the brand, I guess. That's the best way to say it. And we are talking about Kanye West. And Kanye West had a Super Bowl ad in a couple weeks ago. He shot it on his iPhone. It was a very low quality production value and spent $7 million on the spot, and then reported out that that sparked 19 million in sales of Yeezy, his brand of clothing and shoes. What really struck me was that one of the things that he did during this time, one of the things that the brand did, was they made a whole slew of products $20. Everything was $20. So when people saw the ad and went to the site, they selected things based on kind of what they really wanted. He also set expectations that everything was going to take 4 weeks for delivery, at least 4 weeks. What I saw in that was that he probably is getting really rich data about what products are spiking demand because everything else is equal, with that $20 cost. By setting expectations for a 4-week turnaround, there was no inventory. So now they're producing as they get the sales and they don't have that outlay or risk of too much inventory. So it's a really interesting case study in kind of uh unexpected innovation about, the low quality ad that you paid $7 million to show the world, the $20 for things that are usually much, much pricier. So bringing that price point down. And then the supply chain aspect of this, of figuring out, okay, we don't want a warehouse full of stuff that maybe doesn't have the demand. We're going to figure out what the demand is. So I'll be watching this a little bit in the coming months because I think number one, will they deliver is a big question. There's a lot of trust here that people are providing, and I'm not sure that has been legitimately earned yet. The second part of this is, will other organizations kind of experiment with this and figure out what will have the most demand with like a short window of time so that then they know what to produce. So what are your thoughts on this? It's such an interesting, bizarre case study, right?
It's a fascinating case study, and it's a good selection to talk about this because there's a lot to unpack here. I'm with you. I'm not a Kanye fan. I've not been a Kanye fan. I don't like him. But let's separate the person from the case study,
Mhm,
right? Which is why you're doing this, and I think it's a very important thing to do. There's something to unpack here in terms of disruptive thinking. Number one, the idea to just go against the grain and just completely, there's no other word for it, disrupt the way that normal things are done. You
mhm.
have to imagine how much production money and time goes into the Super Bowl ads. I mean, you know, I've been watching Super Bowl ads forever, right? And you look forward to the Super Bowl ads,
Mhm.
right? So imagine the investment, the money, the time, the effort that goes into producing a Super Bowl ad. So to actually take that thinking, in other words, people must have looked at it and said, "What are you, insane?"
Yeah, yeah.
So to do that is disruptive thinking and taking a big gamble and a big chance. Now, the second thing is whether it's paid off. We're yet to see. It's paid
Mhm,
off from a sales perspective. It's paid off from according to his reporting from the revenue perspective. But let's see, as you say, if it's delivered. Let's fast forward to and hope that it does for the
mhm.
case of, say, arguing this business case. If it does deliver, then it's a game changer. It's a
Yeah.
game changer from a marketing perspective. It's a game changer from a messaging and branding perspective, from a sales, inventory management, demand management, forecasting, pricing perspective. I mean, he might have done the analytics here to figure out, okay, I might sell this at $20, but at the same time, from a production perspective or inventory management perspective, I'm lowering my costs here, so it
Mhm,
all equals out. So, I think it's could be a genius move from a business perspective, from
mhm.
a sales perspective, marketing. There's also another element, which is I think this sort of in this world of I don't know, so much hype, right? Having someone who's genuinely putting themselves out there in a low budget but genuine way to say, I'm just selling shoes. I'm
Mhm.
just selling, this is what I wear, this is what it is, and I can shoot this on the iPhone because I think what's more important is you. You're more
Mm,
important than the production value. That's a
mhm.
lesson there as well in customer service. That's a very big lesson. Um,
That's interesting.
Again, we have yet to see if it's going to pay off, but if it does, I think it will completely upend the notion of supply chain, demand forecasting,
Mhm.
supply, how we handle supply and demand. It's a complete game changer, and it's novel, very
It
novel
is.
if it pays off.
It is, I agree, and I think it's interesting that you talked about, like, it's not about me, it's about you, the customer, because I can't think of a person who maybe is more self-absorbed than Kanye West.
Exactly.
So, it's interesting that, by experimenting this way, that might be one of the things that people learn from that. It also a couple months or years ago, it was probably just a couple months ago, one of the things that they're starting to experiment with in real estate is actually 3D printing of houses
Hmm.
and, to solve some of the housing crises and different things for climate control and things like that. And one of the things I read about that, they were saying part of it is we can know exactly what supplies, what we need to do. We have 4 lots. We say, "Who wants them? If you want us to print your house, here's how much it is." It's all very straightforward, but they don't actually build it. They don't invest in the house until they get the demand for it, and I think that
Yeah.
there's something happening overall there that customers are starting to really just, feel like they want more customization and more personalization. And in some ways, some of this might lead to that as well by saying, okay, you can order it and you can customize things because we're not going to actually have that inventory in the warehouse or we're not going to build the house and hope to sell it. So there's something overall there that I think leaders should be paying attention to as well.
Well, what it is again, I hate to keep using the term disruption, but one of the things I'm seeing is the upending, or I don't know how you want to call it, of business models.
Hmm.
So where this is, and maybe historians or economists or socioeconomists will talk about this in 20 years' time. I can't tell you when it was, but we will have been seeing for a while now a trends towards, like you say, personalization, trends towards direct to consumer. For instance, I'm seeing manufacturers that traditionally had nothing to do with the consumer go direct to a consumer. You could buy, for example, paint. You used to need to go
Yeah.
to the hardware store to do that. Now you can buy it directly from the manufacturer of the paint. And
Mhm.
so these business models are completely changing. The norms and the standards of economy are changing. There's different behaviors, whether it's a generational thing, whether it's economic thing. There's just so many different pressure points in business right now that are causing traditional business models to rethink how they
Mhm.
work. And so
Mhm.
we're at this turning point, I think, of with the influx of technology, with the changing pace of consumer behavior, changing pace of technological advancement. All of those things are coming together into one big pressure cooker, which means that business leaders that are disruptive and maybe take a big gamble like Kanye did here could get a huge payoff
Mhm.
for thinking
Mhm.
differently. And so I think I talk about this quite a lot as well in terms of leadership. Those leaders that are able to question themselves and the learning that they've had, maybe even unlearn some of the things that we learned back at business school that might be counterintuitive, could also be in for a good, payout for taking that risk.
Yep.
So I think all of this is just a perfect example of our times, that that sometimes disruption pays off really, really well.
I love it. I hope everybody who's listening thinks of themselves as a disruptor, right? Because one of the things I talk about with customer experience is that the ultimate goal is experiential innovation, because that's what wins today. That's what
Yeah,
puts somebody ahead of the pack. And so if we're not focused on innovation, then we're missing opportunities to really get ahead, to provide something that's never been provided before, to meet customers where they are, all of those things. Maria, we could seriously talk all day.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom. And for those of you who don't already, I totally recommend follow Maria on LinkedIn, Maria Villablanca. You produce great bits of content.
Thank
You
you.
share a lot about your own journey, and it's fabulous what you do there. So I hope everybody takes
Thank you
advantage
so
of that.
much. Thank you, and
And
thank you for having me.
oh my goodness, my pleasure. Thank you for going down these very different rabbit holes that we went down today, but they're all important. And so, for everybody listening and watching, thank you for being part of our Experience Action community. And I cannot wait to answer your next question. Don't forget, you can leave me a voicemail at askjeannie.vip. Until next time, thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.